In today's video, we're gonna look at the 10 words that will make you sound smarter. As a disclaimer, these words are not ridiculously long words that absolutely nobody uses. They're just alternatives to basic ones that you might already know. And you can use them in essays and in day-to-day conversation. But before we go any further, I need to make one thing really clear. Randomly using and learning big fancy words ain't gonna make you sound any smarter.
It's very smarty pants.
However, learning new vocabulary will definitely do the trick. In fact, recent studies have shown that broadening your vocabulary helps strengthen your brain and expand cognitive growth. So let's jump into it. The first word we're gonna look at is the verb to bolster. You'll often hear this word on the news, specifically when talking about finance. To bolster basically means to either support or to boost. For example, the sentence, "These pillars bolster the roof," means that the pillars support the roof and keep it from falling apart. Or take this Financial Times heading as an example. Analysts react as China moves to bolster finance system. What this means is that China has taken certain steps to boost its finance system. Let me know in your comments below if you can think of an example sentence. The next word is the verb to transpire.
What events are going to transpire to get you home?
Now, it has a couple of different meanings, one of them being the process of giving off vapor or moisture. But in more or less everyday use, the verb transpire means that something becomes known that wasn't known before. So let's say, as an example, you're planning to go on a trip with your friends during the month of August. Then one day you talk to one of those friends and it transpires that she had already other plans for that period of time that you were supposed to go on a trip together, but she didn't tell you. Here you could say it transpired that Kate had already other plans for the month of August. Moving on to the word proclivity. I actually learned this word when I was listening to a lecture by Jordan Peterson, who is a well-renowned professor of psychology. And so, yes, this word relates to human behavior. It means that a person has the tendency to do something regularly.
I have a proclivity for viruses
or has the tendency to like something or someone. Another synonym for proclivity is an inclination or a predisposition towards something. As an example, you could say, Kyle has a proclivity to speak his mind, or my friend Jessie has the proclivity to show kindness to people. The next word that will make you sound smarter is the adjective exorbitant. Put it simply, if you describe something as exorbitant, it means that the price that you have to pay for it is unreasonably high. In other words, it means that something is very expensive.
Professor Walsh says adrenaline is like exercise, but without the exorbitant gym fees.
So you could say something like, hotels in Miami charge exorbitant rates, or the rent prices in London are exorbitant. True story. Up next is the adjective futile. You would normally use this word to describe an action that has no effect and is therefore useless or pointless.
Resistance is futile.
Let me give you an example. Janet's attempts to convince her husband to go skydiving were futile, meaning that Janet couldn't convince her husband to go skydiving and her attempts were pointless. Now, imagine that you're feeling under the weather and you have no energy. You could use the word malaise.
She's stuffed up, achy, and suffering from intense malaise.
The noun comes from the French word malaise and directly translates into English as discomfort. I personally wouldn't use this word to describe how I feel because I think it's a little bit over the top, but it's a great word that you could use in an essay. For example, you could say something like, in recent years, Europe has faced a deep economic malaise. This means that in recent years, Europe has faced economic unease, and the economy isn't doing that well. Oh, and you might even run into the word malaise when reading about symptoms of a medication, which might sound something like, symptoms may include fever, dizziness, dry mouth, malaise, and insomnia. When I used to write English essays back in high school, I remember one of my favorite words to use was the noun epitome. Yes, you might be tempted to pronounce it as epitome, but it's actually epitome. And what it means is that a thing, or maybe even a person, is the highest and ideal example of a particular quality of a class of items and people. In case that didn't register with you, let me give you an example. You could say Stalin was the epitome of evil, meaning that he was a perfect example of an evil person.
Epitome of evil.
And if you want to talk about an inanimate object, you could say this building is the epitome of Baroque architecture. In other words, this building is a perfect example of Baroque architecture. As you may already know, sometime last year, or maybe even earlier than that, former President Donald Trump was part of a huge scandal. And the gist of it was that Trump blocked but later released payment of a military aid package to allegedly obtain a quid pro quo corporation from Ukraine. And this brings us to the next word, quid pro quo.
Of course, quid pro quo.
And it's a Latin phrase that's used in both daily conversation and in writing, which literally translates to something for something. It essentially means that you do someone a favor in exchange for something else. For example, you could say something like, you could teach me Spanish and I'll teach you English. I think that's a fair quid pro quo. Another word I used to love to stick into my essays back in high school was the word quintessential. It means that a person or a thing is a perfect example of its type. Now, you might be thinking here, oh, it's the same as epitome. Well, no. Firstly, epitome is a noun and quintessential is an adjective. Secondly, you can't use the noun quintessence to refer to an ideal representative or example.
This is quintessential Charles.
So, you could say something along the lines of, on a hot summer day in Cyprus, the quintessential fruit to eat is watermelon. Or as another example, you could say, my friend George is a quintessential Londoner, which means that he's a typical example of a Londoner. Be very careful here and do not confuse the word quintessential with essential. They do not mean the same thing. Try to think of it this way. Essential means indispensable or important, whilst quintessential means typical. And finally, the word seldom. Put it simply, seldom means rarely.
Women are seldom charitable.
For example, instead of saying I rarely go to the cinema, you could say I seldom go to the cinema. Seldom is a great word that you could use in an essay, be it either for an English exam or university. It will add a little bit of sophistication to your writing and score you extra points for vocabulary in an English exam. And we're done! I hope you guys enjoyed this video and feel a lot smarter than you were about 10 minutes ago. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to my channel for more awesome videos like this one. Feel free to drop me a comment below with an example sentence or two and I'll be sure to have a look at it and reply to you. I'll see you when I see you. Bye!